Well, hello. I'd like to begin today and thank all of you for tuning into this panel called Nevada, the Saudi Arabia for Geothermal Energy with John Snow from McGinley and Associates and our moderator, Reed Cozens. Very excited to be here on behalf of Ormat Technologies. My name is Paul Thomsen and I'm the Vice President of Business Development. And I would like to talk to you all today about the growing demand and development of the state-of-the-art geothermal projects throughout the state of Nevada. I know this is a water conference and you're probably asking yourself, what does this have to do with geothermal? Well, geothermal wouldn't be here without the use of Nevada's incredible geothermal brine and water resources. And the picture you're looking at to start this conference is of an air-cooled facility. And in the words of Mark Twain, who said, or has been credited with saying, that whiskey's for drinking and water is for fighting in Nevada, we quickly learned at Ormat back in 1985 that if we wanted to be successful in building geothermal projects throughout the state of Nevada, they would have to be air-cooled. We couldn't use water to cool these facilities and evaporate it because water was just far too precious a resource in the state of Nevada. Additionally, what we found is we needed to create a closed-loop system for these geothermal aquifers so that we could continue to operate these power plants for decades and decades to not only fulfill our power purchase agreements, but also to be good stewards of this very finite resource in the state of Nevada. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about Ormat, about the innovation of our technology, and then make myself available for questions in a live stream at this conference. So bear with me as we try to walk through this technology, this PowerPoint, my video, and some embedded videos in PowerPoint, which we know will probably goof up at some point. But let's move forward in this recording. Ormat Technologies is a publicly traded company, traded on the New York Stock Exchange, so take what I say with a grain of salt. If you make investments towards our company, you do so at your own risk, and I will try not to make any forward-looking or investment type statements. Today, Ormat is a global company headquartered right here in Reno, Nevada. We own and operate 933 megawatts of geothermal capacity. We are responsible for much more than that in the sale of equipment. We sell equipment to third-party companies around the world and have equipment in 33 countries. We own and operate projects in 6 different countries. And what's exciting and new is you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner that today we also own and operate about 73 megawatts of storage, making us one of the top 10 largest storage developers in the United States. And we are adding that to our portfolio as we move forward. We have about 1,500 employees, many of them located throughout the state of Nevada. Here are all of our projects in the western United States, and what separates Ormat from many different developers is the fact that we have such an extensive exploration and development list. So all the projects you see in red are operating power plants, and the vast majority are in the great state of Nevada. The projects in blue are projects that we are currently working on. They're in some sort of exploration or development phase. This can mean that we are permitting or pulling baseline surveys for those projects. We could be drilling for those projects or have projects under construction, which you can see in the light blue. Ormat will continue to be probably one of the largest developers throughout rural Nevada for the years to come because of the demand, the growing demand we are seeing for baseload resources with zero emissions. What we are seeing in the western United States is this increased demand for projects that are reliable. As many of you know, California had blackouts in the summer of 2020, and they don't want that to happen again. And so they are looking for projects like geothermal that can provide power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, with zero emissions. And when you start to look around at other technologies that have that capacity or that reliability with no emissions, you start to realize that geothermal stands alone in being able to provide that resource. If we move in and focus on just Nevada, you'll see that our projects stretch from Washoe County to Churchill County to Lander, Eureka, and Elko, Pershing, and Humboldt. And we're really proud of the work that we have done in the facilities located throughout the state of Nevada. And Nevada has been our home since 1985 and our corporate headquarters. You know, I think many of you, more than I, can explain kind of the unique geology and geothermal resources throughout the state. But Nevada really stands alone on the Sierra Nevada range in providing these kind of phenomenal geothermal resources close to the surface. And that is what's key for us in developing projects that are economic, that we can sell to the market. My next slide, if it works, is going to be a tour using Google Earth of our actual facility so that you're not just seeing pictures on a map, but we can take a tour and see the actual facility. Well, as you can see, no matter where you are throughout northern Nevada, you probably have an ORMAT geothermal facility near you. And if it were not for COVID at this moment, we would provide tours to all of those facilities. And I would encourage all of you, if you have additional questions or want to visit one of these facilities in the future, to please reach out to us. And as soon as we get vaccinated up and start providing tours again in person, we will be happy to do so. So, a major focus that we want to spend a couple minutes on is to kind of explain how these facilities work. I'm going to try to walk you through it with a basic diagram, and then we have another brief little video. But what makes Ormat's binary technology so unique uh, is that it's a closed loop system. And Ormat really pioneered this type of development when it brought this technology to the US and to Nevada in 1985. Geothermal, as many of you know, has been around for hundreds of years. And it was, first developed when a farmer drilled a well for his livestock, and the water came up out of pressure and turned to steam. Put a steam turbine on that, and we've converted thermal energy to mechanical and started producing electricity by spinning a turbine and a generator. What was so unique about Ormat's technology is that it's able to take much lower temperature resources that may not flash on their own and use a secondary working fluid to build vapor and produce the power that we want. So just walking you through this diagram briefly, you can see that we drill production wells into the hot geothermal fluid. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm moving it around this word production well. We bring up the geothermal brine, and if we follow these arrows, it moves into a vaporizer. And there, the geothermal brine heats a secondary working fluid. And that working fluid is sometimes isopentane or pentane or butane. It is something that vaporizes at a lower temperature than water. When it vaporizes, it builds pressure. And that pressure we allow to relieve itself or move across a turbine blade or a fan blade. And so that expansion of that working fluid spins this turbine blade and starts producing electricity. Now what we do is we take that exhaust gas now and we send it into the air coolers or the condenser. And that condenser cools the liquid back down, it turns back into a liquid, and we have a motive fluid pump which pumps it back into the preheater. So the geothermal fluid, brine if you will, and the working fluid never touch. They are simply in a tube and shell heat exchanger exchanging that heat. And so once the working fluid comes back into the preheater, it starts to warm back up. It goes back into the vaporizer where it flashes, and it continues this cycle over and over again of expansion, condensing. And so sometimes this is called a turbo expander or the binary process. And it's kind of two loops. So you have this first loop of the working fluid constantly being vaporized, cooling back down into a liquid, vaporizing, cooling back down into a liquid. The geothermal brine, on the other hand, moves through the preheater as it starts to cool down, and then we inject it back into the geothermal reservoir. And it matriculates across the hot rocks and cracks and permeability in the Earth's surface and warms back up again until we pull it back out at the production well. So the geothermal fluid is also in a constant loop, if you will, only meeting the working fluid for a moment in time in the vaporizer and preheater. This has created all sorts of benefits to us from a operation standpoint. One, we have zero emissions. We don't have a large steam plume that we have to permit for minerals coming out of condensation and so forth. And because we can do things like with a bypass valve, we can ramp these power plants up very quickly, actually faster than that of a combined cycle natural gas plant. And that is proving to be very interesting to utilities who are grappling with lots of intermittent resources, solar and so forth. And so they're looking at geothermal as a base load or flexible resource that can replace natural gas power plants, coal power plants, nuclear power plants, but also give them the flexibility to continue to add more renewables. So when we see states like California trying to meet 100% renewable portfolio standard, states like Nevada that are stepping up from 50% to 100%, geothermal is going to play an increasingly large role. In the last decade, 95% of the geothermal power plants deployed in the United States have utilized a binary technology like this. This is the heart and soul of Ormat. We design and manufacture the turbines ourselves. We design and implement the air condensers, the vaporizers, and preheaters. If I didn't do a good enough job of explaining it to all of you today, I have one more video that tries to walk you through this process with a little animation to see if that will help.
Welcome to Ormat's geothermal power plant, a green solution for power generation. Let's see how the process works. Hot brine is exploited from the ground through a production well. The hot brine flows through the geothermal piping system to the vaporizer. The hot brine flows through the tubes of the vaporizer while transferring the heat to the motive fluid. The motive fluid evaporates in the vaporizers, effectively changing its state from liquid to vapor. The motive fluid vapor is directed to the turbine where it expands, thus dropping in pressure and temperature and producing rotational shaft power. The rotational shaft power rotates the generator, which transforms it to electrical energy. After rotating the turbine, the motive fluid low-pressure vapor flows to the condensers through a recuperator, where it is condensed back into its liquid state. Then, the liquid motive fluid is pumped through the recuperator where it absorbs some heat from the hot motive fluid vapor in order to increase effectiveness of the boiling process. After vaporizing the motive fluid, the colder brine is directed to the preheater where it heats the liquid motive fluid before it enters the vaporizer. Then the brine is re-injected back into the ground through the injection wells. It is a closed cycle where 100% of the exploited geothermal fluid is re-injected back into the ground.
So, we're also committed to innovation. And John had asked us to kind of focus on what we're constantly doing to improve these power plants and why they've looked so different over the years. And I appreciate the opportunity to say that Ormat, that's kind of who we are from a design company, that we constantly undertake a comprehensive review of our facilities and look at turbine enhancement, condenser enhancements, water assistant fogging, wind vanes, and other options that we can deploy to make our power plants that much more efficient. Our turbines today are implementing 3- and 4-stage turbines. And for those of you who have gone on this Steamboat Hills tour that was also provided as part of the Nevada Water Resources Association annual meeting, you'll see that our air condensers were tilted. And what we learned was that if we didn't have to push the geothermal brine, pump it so hard across a flat surface, but let it simply run downhill and use gravity to help us, we became that much more efficient. We also deployed more efficient turbines at this facility and upgraded from a 2-level unit to an integrated 3-level unit. And without getting into too much engineering talk, This is just a much more efficient turbine that allows us to produce about 18 more megawatts. And so for those of you, the Steamboat Hills power plant has been in operation for 30 years. And last year we decided that we needed to enhance that and put in place a new power plant. And so for those of you in Reno, you may have seen this construction going on the way up and down Mount Rose Highway. And what we were able to do is by using the same geothermal resource, the same wells, we were able to get a net power increase of about 18 megawatts. And this is just an example of the improved efficiency of these state-of-the-art binary facilities that we are deploying today throughout the state of Nevada. This is a picture of that power plant under construction. It is operating today, and this is the tilt I was talking about on these air condensers. And again, this is the result of using air cooling instead of water cooling. Again, recognizing that we want our facilities to have zero water consumption and have no impact on freshwater aquifers. The geothermal reservoir, obviously is not connected in a much deeper resource. And we don't want to use that either. We don't want to deplete that unique geothermal reservoir. And this facility is such a good example of that the resource operated for 30 years. And then we decided to go back and say, we can put a better power plant, a better mousetrap on that resource, but the resource will still be there. And I think this is just a fantastic story of a geothermal reservoir maintained correctly can last into perpetuity. Last thing I'll touch on, as I'm quickly running out of time, is economic development and the impact to Nevadans. These little facilities act like an ATM in the desert. It's one of my favorite quotes from a previous Churchill County Commissioner named Norm Frey, who said, we love these facilities. We're not putting thousands of people into the community. We're not having to build huge new schools or buy new buses and fire departments and police cars and things. And so I want to point out that each 30 megawatt power plant, and you saw many, just a few of them, but many of them in that previous video, have a huge economic impact to the local community. During the drilling and construction phase, we'll spend about $135 million. Reoccurring, we will pay about $2 million annually in taxes, royalties, and operations, many of those going to the local county in which the facility is located in. The jobs, 100 jobs for drilling, 300 jobs during construction, and about 20 jobs to operate each 30 megawatt facility. And we have hundreds and hundreds of megawatts operating in the state of Nevada today. We also have a huge environmental impact. Each 30 megawatt project avoids about 140,000 metric tons of CO2. So as Nevada looks to meet its carbon goals and be environmentally responsible, there's really no better resource than geothermal. Each 1 megawatt of geothermal power produces the equivalent of about 3 to 4 megawatts of solar with storage. Because solar can't operate 24 hours a day. The sun doesn't always shine, there can be clouds and so forth. And so for the yearly output, a geothermal megawatt has just a massive impact on reducing CO2 in our environment. This map shows you the facilities that we are working on moving forward. We are going to be building, you saw some of these facilities in the video earlier. We're going to be continuing to do construction, drill these wells, and develop more and more of these phenomenal geothermal resources throughout the state of Nevada. And last but not least, we had this firm, Applied Analysis and Hobbs and Ong, put together an economic impact report. And you can see that if we bring online another 250 megawatts of geothermal projects, it can have an astounding impact to the state of Nevada. $5.7 billion of total economic output, which includes $3.3 billion of direct economic output and $1.7 of indirect output for all of those projects. Geothermal projects are labor intensive. They require us to be there for the next 30 years and be good stewards, and that's why ORMAT is so proud to call Nevada home. I've had your attention now for 25 minutes. I want to thank you all so much. There is so much more we could talk about, and I'm glad you're putting up with me doing this virtually through PowerPoint and a video. I think I will soon be available to you live, probably with a different shirt on, to answer any questions you may have. But I want to thank you all for taking a moment to learn about the great geothermal resources in Nevada, how they came to be by not consuming water and you know, integrating themselves into the Nevada spirit, and what we can do to bring on more projects and put more Nevadans to work in the years to come, and help our great state rebound from the impacts of this pandemic and COVID-19. So thank you all. I look forward to taking your live questions very shortly. Bye-bye.